Hey guys, Laguna here, and today we're going to go over some major KFM changes that we got in our last patch. Uh, we're going to primarily focus on the win build today, as the win build is what received the most changes. We're going to go over my skill page here. Uh, I'm currently at HM 11, and I still find myself a little short on skill points, which is somewhat unnerving. Uh, but I'm just giving up certain things like HMZ here. Um, Sometimes I choose between Hangmoon Block and HMZ if there are a lot of ads that I need to bring together. Stuff like that. Nothing. I'm not sacrificing anything too critical. But there are definitely some places that I wish I could put points into. And the first major change that I'm going to go over to, which is possibly the most important change to win build, is your Swift Strike. Here we get a guaranteed Cyclone kick. Okay, this is guaranteed um, off any Swift Strike. It doesn't have to crit anymore. So what this means is that you can cancel into two. It's very smooth now. See, and you can do that very consistently. Very consistently. Before we were kind of canceling with LB. It kind of looked like that because this kind of guaranteed. Not, it didn't really guarantee that we got an F proc, but the chances of getting an F proc were much higher because we were doing an F LB2 LBF. But now we don't really have to rely on hitting 3 times. We can do this very consistent canceling throughout any engage. The only thing that you might want to take note of, it does burn your focus pretty quickly sometimes if you don't get any cheap procs, but you do get focus back if the enemy has pressure point enabled. So I found that it's still a pretty sustainable cancel, and it does a lot of damage, and it's really nice to do, and it's very smooth, consistent, and it feels really good to do. A couple other things I want to take note of is that we have a lot of ways to to lower our pressure point cooldown. This is really important because before with Wind Build we did have some ways to lower the pressure point cooldown, but it wasn't as consistent. You'll notice there's a 4th branch here of Avenging Fist. This will ready smite, and it will lower our pressure point cooldown, and it will chain smite into our pivot kick, which also lowers our cooldown. You'll see, here's an example, okay, right here. Okay, there you go. Almost all of those abilities lower our pressure point cooldown, which is really nice, and kind of chain into each other. And another thing they changed is that they made it so pivot kick goes into Cyclone quite fluidly, right? So here, smite, and then I can, right here, and I can go back into my cancel just like that. So all these changes have worked really well in kind of creating fluidity between all the abilities for Wind Build, and just overall makes it feel a lot better and more consistent. You'll notice that we have a new X here. It's Roaring Tiger. This comes out extremely quickly. Also lowers our pressure point cooldown and procs pressure point. I haven't found myself using it that much yet. It's kind of a fail-safe if you run out of other methods to proc your Searing Palm. Like if you use your Avenging Fist and you use your Smite and you use your Pivot Kick, and you're realizing that you don't have much to proc your pressure point, and you see that the timer is running out, you can hit X twice and it'll proc it. Things that you want to remember with Wind Build is that it's all about keeping your Searing Palm debuff on the boss and your Searing Palm buff on yourself on consistently throughout the entire fight. Another major change they made to Searing Palm is that they extended the duration of stage 1 and 2 to 15 seconds. This gives us a lot of time to play around in stage 1 and 2 to extend the entire stage of Searing Palm throughout the fight. So ideally your goal during a boss fight and using Wind Build would be stacking up pressure points slowly throughout the fight, and once your stage 4 pressure point is done, you want to lead right back into stage 1. You want to follow it up. Okay? If you don't have enough points or you're having serious problems with chi sustain, you might want to consider giving up Hung Moon LB on the stage 1 tier, okay, stage 1 column, sorry, and putting into stage 2 if you're really having problems with chi sustain, but you are giving up a lot of damage when you do that. This You're putting it in straight jab here increases your focus recovery on crits and on Searing Palm enemies that have the debuff. But you are giving up a lot of damage here. I think a lot of you already know that when you have 4 stacks, you can kind of burst down the enemy. Let's see, right here, with an FLB cancel, right? It's really nice to combo this with blue buff and a soul burn from a warlock. You kind of just do LB and then F and then 4 into X, and it's definitely a lot of damage. But if you're having major chi sustain, you might want to consider this. It's also very good practice for your canceling, okay? Because you'll be able to do it for a very long time with your chi sustain. You have to remember that you have to put pressure point on them as well for extra chi sustain. I didn't have it there. Iron Mountain, or sorry, they call it Iron Shoulder here, also decreases the cooldown of pressure point. I keep calling it pressure point, sorry guys, but it's Searing Palm. And so does iframing with Flurry. These are all things that you want to use cohesively to keep your pressure point, your Searing Palm cooldown down. Okay, you can also use your QEs to proc your pressure point and to decrease. So while tanking a boss and using all these tools handed to you, you should be able to keep your Searing Palm duration up throughout the entire fight and deal a significant amount of damage. A lot of people have been asking me which is better, fire or wind, fire, wind, fire, wind, and there are definitely arguments supporting both. But for example, if you look in Desolate Tomb, I will almost always use Wind Build for the first boss fight, since my role is the main tank and it's all single target. But for the second boss, I will always use Fire Build, because I can draw enemies together, get an AP buff from my Tremor, and burst down the adds very quickly with this build. And it's definitely much more effective than Wind. For the last boss, I'd probably use Wind more consistently. I have been using Wind more consistently. There's a lot of time where you just have free time to DPS the boss without worrying about being attacked, and Wind Build can really shine with that, because you don't have to move around and you can just F2 R cancel, or 2RF cancel rather. So don't be too discouraged if you don't have enough points for this build. It is definitely doable by sacrificing points in Iron Shoulder. It's definitely doable by not having Hung Moon counter. This is just nice for spin attacks. But core abilities in this build would be 3 points in your Searing Palm, zero point 0.5 points here in your Swift Strike. This is core now. You must have this. Um, there's been some debate on Shin Kick. I personally like to have it. I guess this is just, this to me will always be core, even if an enemy is grappled and you have your restraint ability. I've been using Shin Kick at the end of a restraint or at the beginning of a restraint to make sure that I keep my Searing Palm stacks up even while I'm using restraint skill. So if I'm using restraint and I see that my Searing Palm debuff is about to fall off or my buff is about to fall off, I'll quickly just Shin Kick X and then continue my restraint. It's very convenient to have, and I will always consider Shin Kick core in pretty much every build. I'd consider stage 1 core. Stage 2 is good for practicing, and if you have massive focus problems, but the burst from stage 1 and the DPS you get from it is just too high. You can choose between stage 1 Comet and stage 3 Comet. I don't use stage 2. I've been consistently using stage 1. Aggro Tremor versus Pulling Tremor. You can do either. Another change that I'd like to go over is that if you do have ads to clear and you absolutely don't want to use Fire Build, you do have the option now to use left side Cyclone Kick. This is an AoE, and they have removed the cooldown on it. Okay, you see that? It's a frontal AoE that attacks in a cone. Okay, it is cancelable. It doesn't do as much damage as the other one, but it's definitely good for clearing mobs. And it's fun to use and looks cool. So, there's a plus. Blue buff is core. If you're doing solo stuff, you're going to use individual blue buff, not party. 3 points in the QE is core. I use iframe Z. If I have to clear mobs, I'll put into Hangmud Z. Iframe Flurry, I consider core. You can use the left side, it's a little more damage and lowers your iframe to 1 second. However, I do think you will be doing more. I consider the purpose of Flurry to have a long iframe in those instances where you need one. That is the purpose of it. If I needed a short iframe, I would just QE or SS or use my Z, and I personally have the option of using my Tremor for an iframe as well. Flurry is kind of my ability for those oh shit situations, when mobs spin, or if I have to travel a long distance to a leaping enemy. It's really nice to have. And this left side Flurry, it does more damage, but I think you'd just do more damage not using this with Cyclone Kick anyway. And that's it for Wind build. I don't think I need to make a video on Fire build, as not that many things changed. Please leave your questions, comments below, and have fun using the new build. Thanks, guys.